Hey, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to another Season 7 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today, I'm going to be covering Support Morgana, the Fallen Angel.
We'll bring them pain.
Alright, so let's hop right into this guide by looking at her strengths and weaknesses. So Morgana is a champion with very strong crowd control, which comes from her very long duration root on the Q ability, and of course her stun from her ultimate. For a support champion, she also has some pretty decent damage. She's not going to do as much as something like a Brand or a Vel'Koz, but she will outdamage something like a Leona or an Alistar. She's also got a pretty solid ultimate since it has the potential to stun an entire team. If you can actually pull this off, it's usually going to be a pretty one-sided team fight. Her E ability then gives her a very strong spell shield, and this is great against champions that could usually hook you like a Blitzcrank. If you can time it properly, they will not get pulled in. Because of this shield and her multiple crowd controls, Morgana is a fairly safe laner. With your kit and proper warding, it's going to be very hard to bring you down. Now Morgana, however, is a very skill shot reliant champion. This is pretty much just from your Q ability, but it can be somewhat hard to land, and it must be landed. Now although your spell shield is pretty good, you're still weak against very high poke champions. It also doesn't block attack damage, so something like a Caitlyn will be a pain in the ass. Finally here, we have your long cooldowns and your low mobility. If you end up missing your kit, you better start moving away pretty quickly because you don't have the mobility to jump back out. For your Masteries, you want to go 18 Cunning and 12 Ferocity, grabbing Thunderlord's Decree as your Keystone Mastery. For the rest of your Masteries, you want to pick up the extra 5% CDR, some mana regeneration, of course Bandit so you get some nice gold, and increase your damage as much as possible at the same time. Now for Support Morgana, there's not really any alternatives you want to go for because Thunderlord's Decree is incredibly easy to proc on just your Tormented Soil. It will of course add some nice extra damage into your combos, and I take it every single game. For my runes, I like to stay very generic and get Magic Penetration Reds, Armor Yellows, Magic Resist Blues, and Ability Power Quints. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you've seen this rune page a couple times already. It is the very generic AP setup. We'll want to grab the Magic Penetration and the Ability Power just to make our harassment hit a little bit harder, yet we want that Armor and Magic Resist to be a little bit more durable in the bot lane as well. For your first Summoner spell, you'll want to grab Flash. You are a pretty immobile champion, and it will save you throughout the game. You can even use it offensively to flash forward and snare somebody with your Dark Binding for your team to follow up from a pretty long distance. Ignite is then a great option for your second Summoner spell. It will add some nice kill pressure in lane, and as soon as you land a Dark Binding, you can ignite the target and get some really easy kills with your AD carry. Exhaust, however, is another really solid option, although it was recently nerfed. It's still really strong in those early game duels, and of course in the late game against high damage champions like Yasuo, Riven, and Tryndamere. Your passive ability is Soul Siphon, and this gives you some nice added sustain during the lane phase. So, very simply, Morgana permanently has between 10 and 20% bonus Spell Vamp. For anybody that doesn't actually know, Spell Vamp is basically lifesteal for spells. Whenever you hit something with a spell, you get a portion of it back as health. So this is a pretty decent passive, but it's not like it's broken or anything. As long as you're consistently hitting the enemy champions with your Q and E ability, you will get a portion back of it as health, and this actually gives you some nice sustain. Other than that, there's not too much else to say about it. It's usually better on mid lane Morgana because you're consistently hitting those minions with spells, but on support Morgana, it's just kind of okay. Your Q is Dark Binding, and this is your snare ability that if it hits you, it kind of feels like it lasts forever. When activated, Morgana releases a sphere of dark magic that travels in a line, dealing magic damage to the first enemy hit, and temporarily rooting them. It has a 1175 range, which is pretty damn long, but only a 1200 speed, which is not the fastest out there. It does, however, have a 90% AP ratio, so it hits really hard, and the root duration scales from 2 to 3 seconds, which is really long. During the lane phase, however, this can be somewhat troublesome to land because people are of course going to be hiding behind minions. As soon as they pop out, you can shoot this ability, but since it only has a 1200 speed, usually they can duck behind minions and not get hit by the ability. If this is happening, try to play aggressively past the minions if you can. Of course, this depends on the matchup. Land this ability and follow it with your Tormented Soil. Your W is Tormented Soil, and it does some pretty nice damage and is also great for proccing Thunderlord's Decree and your Spell Thief's Edge. When activated, Morgana infects the target area for 5 seconds, causing enemies who stand on the location to take magic damage every half second, increased by 0.5% for every 1% of the target's missing health. It has a 900 range and a 275 radius, which is pretty decent, and the magic damage per half second is 11% of your AP, and if they sit in the full thing, it's 110% AP, which is pretty huge. The damage is also increased based on percentage of targets missing health, so it's also a great executing ability. If you can, you'll want to use this after your ultimate and your Q ability, so it does as much damage as possible. But during that lane phase, whenever you have a bunch of Spell Thief stacks, you want to use this on the enemy champion because it will proc multiple times and usually proc all 3 at once. This of course will also proc Thunderlord's Decree, which will make it do some pretty significant damage. Your E ability is Black Shield, and this of course is your shielding ability that blocks spells. When activated, Morgana magic shields the target friendly champion or herself for 5 seconds, absorbing magic damage and rendering her immune to all crowd controls while the shield holds. So this is a really strong defensive ability, and if you use it properly, you can block some really important spells. Usually I'll be using this on my AD carry in team fights if I feel like somebody's going to jump on top of them and hit them with a crowd control. If you have an initiator trying to get into a fight as well, this is also great to put on them so they can easily get there. Make sure you time it properly though, because you don't only want to absorb spells that do damage, you want to absorb those really important crowd controls. Your ultimate is Soul Shackles, and this is an incredibly strong ability that can stun multiple targets. When activated, after a 0.5 second delay, Morgana latches chains of energy onto nearby enemy champions, dealing initial magic damage. The tethers grant true sight of affected enemies and slow them by 20%. Targets who did not leave the tether range after 3 seconds are stunned for 1.5 seconds and dealt the same magic damage again. So as long as you can hit multiple enemies with this ability and they get stunned, it will have a 140% AP ratio. Needless to say, if you can get that on a full team in a team fight, you pretty much win the fight. This ability is pretty much also the reason that Morgana will build a Zhonya's. You can jump into the middle of a fight, activate this ability, and then activate your Zhonya's, and they will all be stunned if they do stay in that range. The initial hit only has a 600 range, so they have to be pretty damn clumped up, but they have to run out in a 1050 range for them not to get stunned, which usually will happen, since they are also slowed. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. Then we'll want to focus on maxing our Q ability because the root duration scales and it does a really nice chunk of damage as well. Then you'll want to focus on maxing your Black Shield second to get that shield really strong. If, however, you're against a very high AD team, then this would be pointless and instead you would want to max your W ability second. In most cases though, you'll just want one early point in your W at level 3 so you can actually proc your Thunderlord's Decree and use your Spell Thief's Edge. Then, since the ability isn't that reliable of damage, save it for last. The first combo here you're going to be using in the lane phase is really simple to pull off as long as you can land your Q ability. All you have to do is hit the enemy champion with the Q ability and then drop your Tormented Soil underneath them so they are held in the vicinity and take that damage. Once I have my ultimate, I like to open up with my ultimate so I know I can easily land my Q afterwards. As soon as my ultimate stuns the enemy, I like to follow up with a normal combo of hitting them with a Q and a Tormented Soil. During the time you're waiting for the ultimate to go off, you can of course use your Black Shield or a Zhonya's as well to make sure you survive. Of course, you also have the option of opening up with a Q ability. If it lands, then you can go for the ultimate and follow up with a W. For our AD carry synergies, we first start with Lucian. Lucian is an incredibly strong early game champion, and as long as we can land our Q ability, he will be able to follow up with a lot of his own burst damage. If he's looking to go aggressive in trades, you can toss your Black Shield on him as well, so he will avoid those crowd controls. That's pretty much how simple the combo is, and as long as you can land those Dark Bindings, you're gonna have a good time. Next here we have Twitch, and he can combo really effectively as soon as you land a Dark Binding. Once you land one, he'll toss his W ability on top of them to slow them and start stacking his passive. Of course, you can always drop your W on top as well, and you will be doing a lot of damage over time. Then, after a couple of his auto attacks and a fully stacked poison, he's going to hit that E ability, and whoever was inside there will be dead. Last here, we have Varus. He's really strong because he has some really solid burst damage, and if you do land a Q ability, he can pull it off really easily. Then of course your ultimates combine so incredibly well. You can stun multiple people, he can root multiple people, and you can keep an entire team in an area for a very long duration. During the lane phase, you'll want to try and snare one of your enemies with your Dark Binding. It's a pretty long duration route, and when you add your AD carries damage and your Tormented Soil, you can output quite a lot of damage. If you're missing your Dark Bindings, then you should still look to harass the enemy with your Tormented Soil. It's a great way to get the gold from your Spell Thief's Edge, and will proc Thunderlord's Decree at the same time, which does some really nice harassment. You'll also want to make sure you're getting off good Black Shields on yourself or your AD carry to stop incoming crowd controls and damage. In teamfights, you're going to want to try to get off a good Soul Shackles on the enemy team. It's a very strong ultimate, and if you can stun a bunch of targets in a single teamfight, you're going to give your team a massive advantage. Go deep into an enemy team if you need to, and use your Zhonya's to make sure you survive until it stuns. You're also going to want to try to snare targets and give your allies Black Shield. The snare from your Dark Binding can give your team enough time to delete a target since it lasts like 40 years. Your Black Shield is great if you use it on somebody trying to engage or on a squishy target that will be targeted by a mage. Now let's look at a couple hard matchups, and first up is Lulu. She's really annoying to go against because of her high poke damage and of course her polymorph. You'll want to try to black shield her polymorph whenever you can, but it's really hard to pull off since it is an instant cast. She'll usually get a bunch of points in her E ability as well, which will easily take off your black shield, and then she can polymorph afterwards. Play more passively and only go if your snare lands. Next up we have Sona, who does an infuriating amount of poke damage. Try to stop as much damage as you can with black shield, but her cooldown is way less than yours on her Q ability. When she's level 6, you're going to want to try to block her crescendo at all costs. It will be somewhat hard to predict, but if you see her running in towards somebody, then usually you'll want to black shield them, because there could be an ultimate coming. And last here, we have Janna. Janna will be really annoying for you in team fights, because if you're going in for an ultimate, she can blow you away with her own ultimate. This means at all costs, make sure you have your black shield up whenever you're going for an ultimate, so she can't blow you away. This can be somewhat hard to pull off depending on the team comp you're against, because if they have a lot of AP damage, they can bring down your shield, and then she'll blow you away afterwards. Now let's look at your item build, which starts with a Spell Thief's Edge, health potions, and a warding totem. For your core build, you want to go for Eye of the Watchers, Redemption, and a locket. Eye of the Watchers is a great gold generation item that adds some ability power and of course allows you to ward. Redemption has some fantastic AoE heals, and of course you get the locket for its fantastic AoE shields. Now as an alternative, you could go for Frost Queen's Claim and a Ruby Sightstone. The activation on the Frost Queens is pretty nice because you can slow targets, however you do have to waste an extra slot to get the Ruby Sightstone, which is something I don't like to do myself. For your boot options, we have Boots and Mobility if you're looking to roam, Ionian Boots for 10% CDR, Sork Shoes for its magic penetration, Merc Treads against high AP and CC heavy teams, and Ninja Tabbies against high AD teams. I'll usually go for Boots and Mobility here because I like roaming. For your item pool, you first have the Zonias, which is pretty much a must-buy on Morgana. While you're waiting for your ultimate to stun, you can hit your Zonias and go into Stasis, which will keep your tether on the target and of course stun the enemy. It's a really solid defensive and a great way to make sure that you actually get off your ultimate. If you're then against a team with a lot of crowd controls, you could get a Mikhail's to make sure you can break somebody squishy out of those crowd controls. Then if you instead want to make them a little bit stronger, you could get a Zeke's Herald. For the last item in the item pool, we have the Zizirot Portal. I don't pick it up too often myself, but if the enemy has some Zizirot Portals and you want to try to counter push them, it is still a really good buy. For my example full build though, I take that core build, Boots and Mobility, and then the Zonias, and a Mikhail's. You have a bunch of items that can support your team, yet you also have the Zonias in there to make sure you get off your ultimate, and it is a fantastic full build. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything I've got for Support Morgana. Don't forget to check out the video description below for a link to all my social medias. I stream every night but Tuesday at 7 PM Eastern now, and of course that link is down there. As is my Discord server and my second YouTube channel. Also, if you guys did enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, but other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I will see you in the next one. Take it easy, have a good day, and peace.
Going